Could you just explain what industry you're in and how things were going just before the lockdown?
Yeah, sure. I'm in the building and construction industry. So we do architectural work and construction work. And before the lockdown, we pretty much were picking up business from pretty much the last election. Last election, things were a bit rough. People don't like putting money into property and stuff when they're not sure of what's going on and not knowing who's going to be in power. So from the last election, last that April, things started picking up, and we are going on a good trajectory from there. So before the lockdown, we were finishing projects we were busy with, and we had projects lined up that were going to happen. It was just a matter of time of finishing the timelines to get there. But now at the moment, those are cancelled, mostly because people just don't have the money to invest in developing property. So just overall in the property industry, we're seeing house prices of the existing properties dropping, less demand, and anyone who's busy with something that they were intending on selling or making a profit on is in quite a sticky situation with that.
And how has obviously this has affected you personally and financially, but what about your crew and the guys that work for you?
Yeah, huge problem. So that boiled down to the dynamics of, well, I know other people in this business as well, that boils down to who works for you directly, how you subcontracting that at the time of doing work makes almost no difference to anything, and then suddenly makes a huge difference because it's who you personally responsible for putting food in their hands to put food on their table with their kids. So yeah, that's been really, really rough. So we've managed to just keep the core staff that work for us going on very little, but enough to keep them just getting through. But that can't go on forever. So we actually don't know whether what will happen in future. But that's really, really, really tough.
And do you know of any other businesses that you were working with and their situations?
We've got people just scrambling to try and find some way to make something happen. So look at any subcontractor, look at electrical guys, plumbing guys, whatever. They've obviously tried to pivot as much as possible to find demand in the market, which means we've got a lot of people trying to fish in the smallest pond, a pond with nervous fish. So it's that's quite a difficult one. Um, but I think a common thread, we're finding that almost everyone's in the same position. There's no one that's winning to the point where they feel like they benefiting from this or something. I don't think that's at all possible. In the construction industry, the only exemptions are civil stuff of large projects, so like roadworks, building bridges, things like that, commissioned by the government. Think about infrastructure stuff. Those are still going on, and yeah, those guys are still going ahead. So I also have friends that are in the cement industry, which is a good indication on the blood flow of construction as to where what's going. They are running at about 60% capacity, largely because big civil and infrastructure uses huge amounts of cement. And so those projects are still going on. Those projects, however, impact fewer employees than smaller construction, which is more labor intensive. So it still has keeps a bit of the economy going, those big projects, but the smaller stuff, yeah, is definitely stagnating in between. Um, the frustrations behind this is that I can go and buy whatever I would normally have to buy to do a project. I can go and do it in a personal capacity. I can't do it as a business capacity. So I can go into the same shop, buy the same stuff, come home, do the same things with it. But if I'm not getting paid for it, uh, it's legal. But if I get paid for it, it's not. Managing the health and safety stuff, there is pretty clear guidelines that have been put out as to if they had to allow us to go back to work, what we need to adhere to. That is a little bit difficult to enforce in sometimes, but it is doable. And it's I guess as best they could put out guidelines to figure out. So that would mean like screening workers before they come on site, contactless thermometers, asking them about exposure, and if they know if they've been in contact with anyone, that type of thing. And then personal protection, normal stuff that you'd expect. In terms of how we work, it's very broad. Construction as a broad industry, it's very hard to say the confines of what each individual job would entail. If it was managed that you couldn't do certain jobs and you could do others, perhaps it would make sense. So, for instance, you can lay bricks and plaster a place, but when you're working in close proximity in a closed environment, perhaps you couldn't do something like that. But at this point, no, it's just blanket rule. Everyone's out for now.
Realistically, if we got back to normal in the next month or so, how long would it take for things to pick up again?
It would depend what you have. That's, put it this way, if you've got something that's unfinished at this point, you're not really going back to make profit on it or something. You just you would have incurred so many costs for the delay that who knows what this means, but you'd be just finishing whatever you're doing. The amount of work in the specific market I'm working in is almost nothing at this point, because just it's not a good time, and I don't think I'd give anyone advice to be building stuff right now. It just doesn't make sense. It's cheaper per square meter to buy a place, and economically, unless you have a emotional reason why you want to do something and it's not an economical one, you probably wouldn't do it. So we're going to go back to a very stale market. Not quite sure. It's many unknowns, but until, if I had to estimate how long it'll take for things to start getting up again, it would mean that all the other industries out there would need to be well oiled, money flowing through it, things pumping along nicely before it boils down to us for some parts. Other people in construction that are in more commercial construction probably recover a lot quicker, but for the type of stuff we do with residential, it's going to take a while. I don't see it recovering very quickly. You know.
And on a positive note, your daughter was born in the last few days, and you had good things to say about how the hospital dealt with things and the care you had there.
Yeah, so knowing that in Johannesburg we've had, make sure getting these right, but Morningside Clinic that had staph infections. We've had Stunning Hill just in the last few days that had staph infections. And knowing that people in and out of hospitals are people that are potentially on that very high risk. So you don't want them to get sick. The responsibility for them to keep an eye on who's going in and out and manage things is quite a huge responsibility, but they did it in a very good way, where it didn't make us feel like we were like bad people for wanting to be in the hospital and having the potential of having it. And then the process of how things went off was pretty cool. They have a pretty streamlined screening process. Come in, literally takes like 2 minutes, and then it takes a while to get results, but it's just because it's the type of result they want. And then so it was about 24 hours. And then how the hospital handles you afterwards is basically, once they are confident that you don't have it, then it's pretty much things are sort of like normal inside. You use a mask, but yeah, everything's good. So yeah, I was really impressed with that. It didn't feel like you were in a crisis once you were past the screening. So that felt good in a time where we didn't want to have to deal with all that with a new baby coming into the world. So yeah,
And
that's all good.
and was were there less people in the hospital than you would normally expect?
So coming towards the time of the birth, anyone who is not absolutely necessary to be in hospital is not allowed to be in. So I was not allowed to be at the last few checkups with my wife being pregnant at the gynae. It was just her allowed to be in for the last two, which meant obviously fewer people around. Non-emergencies of any kind, of any checkups were cancelled, so there's just generally a lot less people in. However, also no visitors for anyone in the hospital. I was only allowed in with my wife because I was tested, and it was just myself, nobody else. However, just as we were coming out of hospital, we were there for 3 days. It seemed like there were more and more people there, and that's because I think there's more people needing to be tested for different reasons, and you just see more people